She didn't walk into Hollywood. She entered like a verdict. Anne Baxter was not discovered. She was declared. A voice like velvet thunder, eyes that never blinked. She won an Oscar before she learned to be afraid. She played saints. She played seductresses. She played fire and left the ashes for others to clean. She wasn't part of cinema. She was its consequence. And then came the silence. Not from the cameras, from the ones behind them, the daughters, the ones who didn't follow her shadow, they lived inside it. Not spotlights, stillness, not ambition, distance. While the world remembered Anne Baxter's fire, they held its heat in private. They didn't inherit fame, they inherited aftermath. Each one walked away from the noise, not because they feared it, because they understood it. Some daughters tell the story, others protect it. If you believe some legends burn brightest when remembered in silence, carry this one with you. Subscribe to our channel and let the forgotten be remembered with grace. She was the first, before the others. Before the world knew Anne could be more than a role. Katrina Baxter, born into a name too loud to hold. Her mother was fire, but Katrina moved like water. She didn't raise her voice. She raised questions. Who am I when the cameras aren't rolling? What does it mean to be born from fame but not wanted? She didn't chase legacy. She walked beside it, then beyond it. While Anne stood in the center, Katrina stood just outside the frame. Not unseen, just unclaimed. She studied art. She studied language. She chose silence before it ever became necessary. She once said, "I didn't want to be just somebody's daughter." And she wasn't. She became her own. A life without headlines. A path without echo. Not rejection, not rebellion. Just the courage to begin without a script. She said it once, and never needed to say it again. Because some lines don't ask for repetition. They carry their own thunder. Katrina wasn't angry. She was awake. She saw what fame demanded and refused to be devoured. She didn't storm out. She stepped aside. No memoir, no red carpet, no interviews about childhood pain. She built distance the way others build careers, deliberate, patient, complete. The world kept asking, what's it like to be Anne Baxter's daughter? She never answered, because the real answer was her life itself. She became a mother, a traveler, a quiet voice in crowded rooms. She didn't chase identity. She shaped it out of silence. Some inherit legacies. Katrina chose to inherit space. And in that space, she became free. Her son, her spirit, gone. Tobin von Ditter. A name barely whispered in public, but carved in grief. Anne gave birth to him in 1968, raised him beside the daughters, held him close. But some stories don't get endings, only absences. Tobin took his life before manhood could shape him. No spotlight, no scandal, just silence. Some inherit fame. He inherited fracture, and the daughters, they carried it with them. Not as a secret, as a scar. Because when a brother disappears, you don't speak louder, you listen longer. Katrina carried it in calm, Melissa in movement, Maginel in prayer. They didn't name it publicly, they didn't need to. Loss like that speaks without sound. Anne never recovered. She just moved forward. But the daughters, they remembered. Not with tributes, not with tears on tape, with presence, with protection. Some wounds stay private so they can stay sacred, and Tobin's name still lives there. The second daughter, the one born not from film, but from foundation. Melissa Galt, design in her blood, Wright in her name, because her grandfather was Frank Lloyd Wright, and her mother, a master of illusion. But Melissa didn't want illusion. She wanted structure. She didn't build temples to herself. She built space. Not to be seen, but to be felt. Interior design, form, balance, stillness. She understood that light must land somewhere, so she shaped the rooms where others could finally rest. Melissa didn't follow her mother's voice. She followed her own lines, straight, clean, unapologetic. She taught design. She spoke on purpose. She mentored without performance. No scandal, no memoir, no chase. Just space, sacred and sharp. Some children escaped the spotlight. Melissa redesigned it so no one would burn. She said it with a smile, sharp, certain, unapologetically hers. Give me the luxuries of life, and I will willingly do without the necessities. It was her mother's favorite quote, but Melissa, she lived it differently. Anne performed it on screen. Melissa practiced it in space. She didn't want extravagance. She wanted intention. Design wasn't decoration. It was freedom. Freedom from chaos, from noise, from living someone else's story. She built a career that required no legacy, no famous mother, no grand name, just vision, precision, presence. She taught others to build from their center, not from applause. She didn't ride the myth. She reimagined it, room by room, life by life. Her Instagram wasn't a shrine. It was a blueprint, quiet power with clean lines. Melissa didn't walk away from her mother's world. She redesigned the parts that never felt like home. There were no cameras, no costumes, no script, just a hallway, a breath, and a daughter. Anne Baxter collapsed in Melissa's home, not on set, not on stage, but in real life, where legends aren't lit and pain doesn't call cut. It wasn't dramatic. It was human. A stroke, a fall, a silence no applause could fill. Melissa was there, not as a witness, as a daughter. She didn't hold a legacy. She held a hand. No flashbulbs, no headlines waiting, just presence and breath, and the weight of final moments. Anne died days later. December the 12th, 1985. The woman who burned through screens left in stillness and in the arms of the one who had learned to design peace. Some daughters inherit the story. Melissa held the end of it. And in doing so, she gave her mother something the world never could. A final act without performance. A goodbye without spectacle. The youngest, the quietest. Named for her great-aunt, a lineage of artists. A name carved in history. But Maginel Baxter didn't want a legacy. She wanted silence. She was born in 1951, adopted into light but drawn to shadow. The world expected a performance. She offered stillness. No press, no premieres, no parade of interviews. She didn't step away from the camera. She never stepped into it. Some daughters reject their name. Maginel just released it. She didn't argue with the myth. She slipped beneath it. A child of fame who chose to become a keeper of quiet. She watched Anne become a storm and decided to become sky, not empty endless. Maginel didn't ask to be seen. She asked to be free. And when the world didn't understand, she didn't explain. Because some lives are sacred in their refusal to be public, she didn't disappear. She descended into quiet, into prayer, into herself. Maginel became a nun, took vows, entered monastic life. 19 years, no stage, no mirrors, not a rejection of her mother, but of the world that misunderstood her. She didn't renounce family, she renounced performance. The cameras stopped asking, but she had already stopped answering. While others chased clarity, she embraced surrender, obedience, solitude, stillness. Not as punishment, but as healing. She lived with sisters, slept under simplicity, prayed instead of posing. And somewhere, between chants and silence, the noise inside her began to dissolve. Fame had given her nothing. Faith gave her space. She didn't leave to be forgotten. She left to be found. Because some daughters don't follow the myth, they follow the mercy that comes after it breaks. From silence, she returned, but not as a prodigal, as a presence. No spotlight, no press release. Just Maginel reborn in a way the world couldn't measure. She left the order, but kept the stillness. She became a counselor, a healer, a guide for those drowning in the noise she once escaped, from obedience to offering, from prayer to purpose. She studied psychology, built rooms where grief could speak, lit candles for others with the flame she once buried. She called her new practice Blue Rose Healing Arts, because blue roses don't exist in nature. They must be made, like peace, like redemption. She didn't speak of Anne, she spoke of pain and how to walk through it. She didn't advertise her past, she built a future from it. Some daughters reclaimed their names. Maginel reclaimed her voice not for attention, but for others. Not to echo her mother, to break the silence for those who had none. Not aging, rising. She didn't fade, she crowned herself. Maginel entered the crone phase with no fear, no apology, no need to explain. In ancient traditions, the crone is not weak, she is wisdom incarnate. And Maginel wore it like a robe of truth, not bitter, not broken, just beyond glamour, beyond expectation, beyond the myth of youth. She began to teach, to write, to guide women through fire without getting burned. She spoke of trauma, of embodiment, of sacred restoration. Not on stages, in circles, in sacred spaces where pain could exhale. She taught that aging is not decline, it is revelation. And when the world said, "Where have you been?" she answered, "Becoming." Some daughters inherit crowns of jewels. Maginel built hers from silence, service, and scars. She didn't become less. She became legend on her own terms. They didn't walk the same path, but they carried the same weight. Anne Baxter gave them life. The world gave them pressure. And each one found her own way to survive it. Katrina, the first to step aside. She didn't rebel. She returned to herself. Melissa, the one who built. Not with fame, but with form. She carved space from legacy's rubble. Maginel, the silent ember. She turned inward, then upward, then toward others. 3 sisters, 3 exits, 3 fires that refused to become spectacle. They never chased the screen. They never sold the myth. They didn't profit off pain. They protected it. Privately, elegantly. Some siblings share memories. These 3 shared restraint. They didn't shout their story. They lived it in quiet defiance. They didn't want to be Anne Baxter. They wanted to be whole. And in walking away, they honored her more than applause ever could. She left more than roles, more than awards, more than the myth that shimmered on screen. Anne Baxter left a silence only her daughters understood. Not absence, not neglect, but the kind of presence that fame makes impossible to hold. She gave them her fire. But fire burns. She gave them her name. But names can weigh more than they shine. What Anne left behind was not just legacy. It was the challenge of living beneath it without being consumed. And each daughter, Katrina, Melissa, Maginel, took that challenge and turned it into something sacred. They didn't become versions of her. They became answers to the question she never solved. How do you love deeply in a world that only wants performance? She tried. She stumbled. She glowed and disappeared. And her daughters, they didn't judge her. They carried her, each in her own way, each with quiet strength. Because some legacies aren't built in public. They're carried in silence by the ones who never asked for them. Fame dies loudly. Legacy dies in silence. Unless someone stays behind to remember what the world ignored. Anne Baxter burned through cinema, but her daughters, they walked through ash. They didn't inherit the light. They inherited its cost. No headlines, no memoirs, no vengeance. Just restraint, just distance, just grace. Katrina stepped aside. Melissa built something new. Maginel walked into stillness and returned as a healer. They didn't ask for the myth, but they bore it with quiet defiance. Because some stories don't need to be retold. They need to be carried. If you believe some legends are held in silence, not shouted in light, carry this one with you. Subscribe to our channel and let the forgotten be remembered with grace.